Okay, I know what you're thinking. In the title, golf swing much easier? Yeah, it will be. Truthfully, we're going to be talking about how you should move the hips, and once you understand this information, it will make the golf swing a million times easier. Clear your hips? Don't? Well, yes and no. If I sort of explain quickly before we start talking about how the hips should move in the golf swing, the two problems that I tend to see is spinning motion with amateur golfers, which means they're firing the hips like so, they get massively out of sequence. And that's why I don't like the phrase clear the hips. So when people reach out for online lessons, obviously they'll send me the swings and I'll say, what are your conscious thoughts? And most people will generally say something along the lines of clearing the hips. And most people are stuck. They start clearing the hips really early, they get the sequence wrong, and the whole of the rest of it is a mess. So it's not that your hips shouldn't rotate. What we need to be careful of is the language and the terminology that we use, which is why in today's video, we're going to be really careful and just go through this sort of step by step of exactly what should be happening with the hips in the golf swing. So the other thing that, and being honest, hold my hands up, I've been doing online lessons now for over a year and met loads and hundreds of different golfers. And one of the phrases that I no longer use anymore is downward facing pelvis. It's not that the pelvis isn't downward facing. It's just, again, what that mentally means to that golfer. And I thought that that was causing more of a hindrance than a help than I originally thought. So don't clear your hips. Your hips are going to rotate. It's the terminology. Downward facing pelvis. It's downward facing. It's the terminology. I tend to find for more golfers, it didn't help than what I'd have liked. So let's talk about what we should be doing. The backswing position, first and foremost. The biggest problem that we tend to see in the backswing position is golfers tend to stand up, which means that you're coming out of posture. There's only two causes for this. The first one, which is I would say 80% most likely to be the case, is the posture itself. So what you do, you stand up nice and straight, you do a little mini ab crunch to get your belt buckle up towards your chin. You put your hands on your thighs, you get your hands to reach down to your knees, but you make it feel more like it's upper body going over rather than bum back. This produces less angulation than this. This golfer is going to stand up all day long. This golfer is going to find it much easier to stay in posture. So 80% of the time, it is likely to be the posture itself which is causing you to stand up. Therefore, the remaining sort of 20% of the time, it tends to be a takeaway discrepancy. So if you take the club, if you're one of those that drags the club on the inside, what happens is when you move this sort of way, the shoulder operates much higher. So it means that you look this way, and then as you complete your sequence, you're going to stand up and you look like this. What you need to be doing is taking that club straighter back, and by doing that, it naturally drops that lead shoulder more downward. Then you can complete your rotation. Happy days. If you're somebody who's standing up, then it is only through one of those things, okay, or one of those two things. Now, let's talk about the sort of transition, okay, what needs to happen at the start of the sort of downswing. Biggest sort of problem is this sort of spinning out motion where the right hip fires forward. So what I like to try and get golfers to do, that I get the chance to work with, is I like them to try and incorporate a recentering motion. Now, recentering motion essentially means that you would take the club back halfway, and as you complete your upper body move, so I still rotate my shoulders, can you see the way my trail hip moves more in towards the center of my stance? So I go takeaway, like so. The benefit of moving this way is it means that I don't have to do as much linear motion to start the downswing because of that recentering move. And I tend to think it keeps that hip back. Right? So that's a really important thing that I would suggest if you're somebody who is massively sort of over the top this way, I would suggest take the club straight back, get the trail hip moving more into the back, and then from there you're going to have a much easier time working on that transition. So we're getting somewhere. We've discussed the problem of standing up, and we're starting to incorporate the first sort of plan of action against somebody who gets spinny hips, and it's to try and get the feeling of, as you're taking the club up, get the trail hip moving in towards the center of the stance. Perfect. We're getting there. Right. This is where it gets messy for a lot of golfers that I meet, for many different reasons. I'm going to explain the problem first. Golfers that start the downswing, they kind of, even if they're in a decent position, sometimes at the top, they potentially want to get over the ball or in front of the ball or try and control the low point, and they move like this. Now, what you can see is when I'm moving like this, can you see the way that if you were to draw a line through my lead hip, can you see the way that it's very vertical from there between my lead shoulder, and it kind of really causes a lot of steepness in the early downswing. Now, golfers will do one of two things from here. The first thing that they'll do is they'll either hold onto their angles and swing over the top. The second thing that they'll do is that they'll either be forced to create a casting motion so that the swing is wide enough that you don't plough the club in the ground. So you need tilts. And this is what I've been talking more about recently. Those of you that have been watching the channel will hopefully appreciate that. Instead of using terms like downward facing pelvis, I'm trying to talk more about tilts. So what do I mean by tilt? That's a tilt, okay? So we rotate around the tilt. As I then start my downswing, I just get the feeling of keeping my head focused on the back of the ball as I pull my lead hip back, and this again helps maintain those tilts. Stops this motion, see my trail hip comes firing forward, and it means that you move more like this. Let me show you from side on. So the incorrect way is this U or U, depending on how you hit it, as opposed to that way, see? So the consciousness needs to be keep your head still as you pull the lead side back, not clear your hips, yeah? It's not a case of clear the hips and fire them. It's just a case of keep your head back, pull the lead hip back, and do it to your capacity, right? Don't go firing the hips faster than you're physically capable of, because I don't reckon you get injured, but the sequencing will be wrong. So it's more about the importance of understanding the tilt. Keep your head still as you pull the lead side back. Don't move this way. That's your trail hip firing forward. You're going to get stuck. Good. If you can transition pretty well, I think that you're going to be a pretty consistent golfer. So that means if you've got a golf swing where you've sort of taken it back on plane, recentered a little bit, pull the lead hip back, even if you just sort of, don't have a huge amount of rotation of your lower body at this point and you hit it with your hands and your arms, I still think as long as you can guide that club on plane, you're going to be pretty consistent. We're not going into the huge benefits of more rotation because I don't want to get lost in the context of this video, but the last missing point or the last missing piece is how those hips should move to get you into impact. And excuse the angle, but I think this is the best one. So if I sort of face you this way, we've gone boom, yeah, then recenter. Now I've gone keep my head still, pull my lead hip back. Now what you can kind of see is that all I'm going to do is just keep pulling my lead hip back. Yeah, so my lead hip moves more back in towards the center of my stance like so. Yeah, and the better that you can move in this sort of fashion, the more that you're going to be able to open your body up. The more that you kind of get stuck over that left leg, the more that your weight will get stuck on the hip joint and you're going to get stuck. So from face on, that means that you kind of go boom, boom, and then great looking transition. But if you're too stuck over on this lead hand side, you're going to get stuck and you're going to get flicky. You have to pull the lead hip back to give yourself the chance of moving those hands through. The best way to do this genuinely is just to become more aware of your body. So just at home, just sort of do some of these sort of exercises where you get the feeling of the left hip moving back. The left leg should feel much more weightless, shouldn't feel heavily loaded, especially when you're pulling that lead hip back, right? And then from there, you can just sort of work again to within inside your physical capability. And that's it for today. So I'm hoping that this video is going to prove really useful, not only if you're new to the channel, but really useful to those of you that have been supporting for a while and watching the content, which I do hugely appreciate. Got one more great video coming up this week. We're going to be talking very much about the driver and then going to be back out and about on that golf course, playing some golf and all the rest of it, which I can't wait to get out and about doing again. You know what to do if you've enjoyed the video. Always one of those. Remember, it's free to subscribe. I'll catch you with you guys really, really soon.